Hi, everybody. Today we're going to learn about inverse trigonometry. So in our last lesson, we were able to find a missing side or a sine ratio or a cosine ratio of a triangle. Today we're going to reverse that idea and figure out if we are given the sides, how do I find a missing angle? So we're going to start with our warm-up problem. Okay, I want you to find this angle. Okay, so the cosine value I'm telling you is 3 over 16. I want you to guess a few angles, figure out how close can we get to that angle. So pause the video, try it out, see how close we can get to that angle. Okay, so from the last lesson, okay, we see the cosine of this angle is the adjacent over the hypotenuse. I can label the adjacent and the opposite and the hypotenuse from that angle. And I know adjacent over hypotenuse is the cosine ratio. And I could guess a whole lot of angles between 0 and 90. And cosine of 79 is 0.1908. And I want to get to 0.1875. And cosine of 80 is too small. So I got to pick a number between 79 and 80. Now, this guess and check method takes way too long, very inefficient. So we have a tool called inverse trigonometry to help us solve for theta. We're still going to set up the same equation type, just now our variable is in a different spot, so we're going to learn today how to solve it. So today we're going to learn about inverse sine and inverse cosine and inverse tangent. Okay, which when I'm asked to find the angle, I'm going to use inverse trigonometry. Kind of like reverse trigonometry. So the input this time is the ratio, and then the output is the angle. So from last time, we remember the sine ratio is opposite over hypotenuse, and the cosine ratio is adjacent over hypotenuse, and the tangent ratio is opposite over adjacent. None of these change. But what we can add to them is if we're trying to find the angle, we're going to take the inverse of the ratio. So these two statements are really important. When we want to find the side, we use our standard trigonometry and we can do it. Okay, we put the angle in, we have one of the adjacent or the hypotenuse or the opposite, and the missing side is x, we solve for it. When we want to find the angle, we're going to use inverse trigonometry. Now on your calculator, there's an inverse button, and that's going to be super important when we want to find the angle. So let's take a look at a few examples. Okay, still the same. Okay, if I'm looking at angle A, I label the adjacent, the opposite, the hypotenuse. I could set up the ratio. Now the question, though, is going to be, can I find what the measure of angle A is? So we have to think about the angle, the ratio. So we start at A. We know that the sine of A is 20 over 29, and the question is solve for angle A. So now what we're going to do is we're going to take the inverse. So what that means is we're taking the inverse of the ratio, the inverse of 20 over 29, which is approximately 43.6 degrees. Okay, and I could have used the inverse sine, or maybe I wanted to say the cosine of A is 21 over 29, and I could have used the inverse cosine as well. So sometimes they give you a whole lot of information, and you get to choose which path you want to take. So it's either the inverse sine of 20 over 29 or the inverse of 21 or inverse cosine of 21 over 29 will both give you the same answer, 43.6 degrees. So you're still setting up your ratios, still setting the equation every time. Now we just take that one extra step of using the inverse. So here are the hints, and we have some of these from last time. If you're given a word problem, we draw a picture and we label it from the starting angle, the opposite, the adjacent, the hypotenuse. We're always going to write the equation, and then to solve, if we need to find the side, we can use trigonometry. So we use sine, cosine, or tangent. But when we need to find an angle, we use inverse sine or inverse cosine or inverse tangent. So set up the equation and look, what is it trying to have us find? What are we solving for? So we're going to go back to the warm-up question, and now we're going to solve it algebraically instead of guess and check. So pause the video. I want you to solve using the equation and your calculator. Find the measure of angle theta. Okay, this angle right here, let's find the measure of it. Pause the video, take a minute or two, get all the details down, get the correct answer. Okay, maybe this problem was very straightforward for you. Maybe you stumbled somewhere. Let's take a look. So the cosine is because it's the adjacent over the hypotenuse. Then I'm going to use the inverse cosine to get theta. So theta equals the inverse cosine of 3 over 16. I use a calculator for that. I don't have that memorized. And I get 79.19 degrees, and we'll round it according to whether it says round to 1 decimal or 2 decimal places, or even it could say round to the nearest whole degree, and then it would just be 79 degrees. So here's one more. I want you to find the measures of angle A and B to get lots of practice. Pause the video, take 2 or 3 minutes, set up your equations, find the angles. Okay, so hopefully you have 2 angles and you're going to check them. So in this case, if I'm starting at A, I have my opposite and my adjacent. So I'm going to use tangent of 7 over 4 and use the inverse tangent of 7 over 4. And then if I'm going to use B, then this is my opposite and this is my adjacent. So the ratio is different. Both cases I have to use tangent because I only have the opposite and the adjacent from the angles. One case I get 60.26 degrees. One case I get 29.74 degrees. So this is how we use inverse trigonometry if we're looking for the angle and we're given the sides. Now in the next lesson, we're going to learn how to put everything together and find missing angles and missing sides and use all of the rules we've ever learned about right triangles.